The day my husband Ethan left for deployment was one of the hardest days of my life. I stood at the airport terminal fighting back tears as he wrapped his arms around me one last time. His deployment was expected to last 8 months, and although we'd been preparing for it for weeks, nothing could truly prepare me for the loneliness that came when I watched him disappear through the security gate. "You'll be okay," Ethan said softly, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "And remember, this house is yours. It's our home. No matter how far away I am, this is where we belong." I smiled through my tears and nodded. "I'll be waiting for you. For the first few weeks, I managed well enough. Ethan and I talked whenever his schedule allowed. I kept busy with work, took care of the house, and counted down the days until he would come home. Then my family got involved. One Sunday afternoon, my mother called unexpectedly. "Honey, we need to talk about Melissa." My younger sister, Melissa, had always been the favorite child. Growing up, she never had to face consequences for her actions. If she made a mistake, someone else fixed it. If she wanted something, someone gave it to her. "What about Melissa?" I asked cautiously. "She's having a difficult time right now," Mom said. "She lost her apartment." I sighed. "That's unfortunate, but what does that have to do with me?" There was a brief silence before Mom delivered the answer I had already suspected. "We think she should stay with you." I nearly laughed. "Mom, Ethan is deployed. I'm living alone and working full-time." "Exactly," she replied. "You have plenty of space." Within hours, my father joined the conversation. Then Melissa herself called. "I just need somewhere temporary," she said sweetly, "maybe a few weeks." The pressure from my family became relentless. Every day brought another phone call, another guilt trip, another reminder that family was supposed to help family. Eventually, exhausted and worn down, I gave in. "Fine," I told Melissa. "A few weeks. That's all." The very next weekend, she arrived with far more than a few suitcases. Boxes filled the driveway. Furniture followed. Then decorations. I stared in disbelief as movers unloaded what looked like an entire apartment. "Melissa," I said nervously, "what exactly is all this?" She smiled. "Just some things to make myself comfortable." That should have been my warning. At first, I tried to be welcoming. I helped her settle into the guest room and adjusted to sharing the house. But within days, small things began changing. The decorative pillows I had chosen disappeared. Pictures were moved. Furniture was rearranged without my permission. Every time I questioned it, Melissa brushed me off. "I'm just helping improve the place." Soon, she was inviting friends over without asking. They filled the living room, used my kitchen, and acted as if they belonged there. One evening, I came home from work and found Melissa sitting on my couch surrounded by 3 friends. "This wall color is depressing," she was saying. "I've been thinking about repainting it." I froze. Repainting it? It wasn't her house. It wasn't even her room. Yet somehow, everyone acted as though I was the unreasonable one. As I stood there listening to my sister discuss changes to my home, a sinking feeling settled deep in my stomach. Melissa wasn't planning to stay for a few weeks. She was settling in. And for the first time since Ethan left, I felt like a stranger in my own home. By the 2nd month of Melissa living in my house, it became painfully clear that she had no intention of leaving. The promise of just a few weeks had quietly disappeared. Whenever I brought it up, she always had an excuse. "I haven't found the right apartment yet. The rental market is terrible. I just need a little more time." At first, I tried to be patient. After all, she was my sister. But patience became harder and harder to maintain as she pushed every boundary imaginable. One Friday evening, I came home from work exhausted and ready to relax. As I walked upstairs, I noticed something strange. The guest room door was open. The room was empty, completely empty. Confused, I looked inside. The bed was gone. The dresser was gone. Even the curtains were gone. My heart began racing. I immediately walked toward the master bedroom Ethan and I shared. When I opened the door, I nearly dropped my purse. Melissa's clothes filled the closet. Her makeup covered my vanity. Her shoes lined the floor. Worst of all, she was lying comfortably on my bed, scrolling through her phone. "What are you doing?" I asked. She looked up casually. "Oh, good, you're home." I stared at her. "Why are your things in my room?" She sat up and shrugged. "The guest room was too small. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, so you moved into my bedroom. Technically, our bedroom isn't being used right now. Our bedroom," I repeated. The words felt like a slap. She rolled her eyes dramatically. "Don't make this a big deal." I immediately called our mother. To my shock, Mom sided with Melissa. "It's just a room," she said. "A room." I replied, "It's Ethan's and my bedroom. Melissa needs comfort right now." I hung up before I said something I would regret. Over the following weeks, things got even worse. Melissa began posting photos all over social media. Pictures of herself drinking coffee in my kitchen. Pictures of herself relaxing in my backyard. Pictures from inside the master bedroom. The captions made my blood boil. "Love my cozy home. Finally settled into my place. Home sweet home." Friends and relatives started commenting. "Your house is beautiful. You've done such a great job decorating." Melissa never corrected them. In fact, she encouraged the misunderstanding. One afternoon, a neighbor stopped me while I was collecting the mail. "I didn't realize your sister owned the house," she said. My stomach dropped. "What?" The neighbor looked confused. That's what Melissa told everyone. I could barely speak. That night I confronted her. "You've been telling people this house belongs to you." Melissa crossed her arms. "I never said that. People think you're the homeowner. Maybe because I actually take care of the place." The comment hit like a punch. I worked hard to maintain our home while Ethan was away. Yet somehow she had turned herself into the victim and me into the problem. When I called my parents again, hoping for support, they disappointed me once more. "You're overreacting," Dad said. "Melissa is family." The familiar phrase made me furious, so was I, but no one seemed to care. For the first time in my life, I realized my family wasn't interested in fairness. They were interested in keeping Melissa happy, no matter who got hurt. That night, I sat alone in the guest room that had become my bedroom. I stared at a framed photo of Ethan and me taken before his deployment. I missed him more than ever. I wished he were home. I wished he could see what was happening. Most of all, I wished someone believed me. As I looked at his smiling face in the photograph, I made a decision. I would stop arguing. I would stop begging my family to understand. I would simply wait. Eventually, Ethan would come home. And when he did, the truth would finally have nowhere left to hide. 3 weeks after my last argument with Melissa, I received a message from Ethan that changed everything. I was sitting at my desk during lunch when my phone buzzed. "Call me when you can. I have news." My heart immediately started racing. News from Ethan could mean anything. The moment I got home, I called him. His face appeared on the screen, and for the first time in months, I saw a huge smile on his face. "What's going on?" I asked. "I've got a surprise." I smiled. "What kind of surprise?" He leaned closer to the camera. "My deployment is ending early." For a moment, I couldn't speak. "What?" "I'm coming home." Tears instantly filled my eyes. "You're serious?" "Very serious." I laughed and cried at the same time. When, about 2 weeks, the news felt like sunlight after months of darkness. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. I wanted to tell him everything that had happened with Melissa. Every lie, every insult, every boundary she had crossed, but I stopped myself. Those conversations were difficult over video calls, and part of me wanted to handle things face to face. Besides, I didn't want his final days overseas filled with family drama. So I simply said, "I can't wait to have you home." Neither of us knew that Ethan's return would happen even sooner. 4 days later, I was stuck in a late meeting at work when my phone suddenly rang. It was Ethan. Confused, I answered. "Hey, what's wrong?" "Nothing," he said with excitement. "My flight got moved up." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm home." I nearly fell out of my chair. "Home?" "As in standing in our driveway right now." I gasped. "Oh my God, I wanted to surprise you." I couldn't stop smiling. "Stay there, I'll leave work right now." As I grabbed my things and rushed toward my car, I had no idea what Ethan was walking into. When Ethan later told me what happened, I could hardly believe it myself. He unlocked the front door, expecting a quiet house. Instead, loud music blasted through the living room. Voices echoed throughout the house. People were laughing, talking, drinking. The place looked like a party. Several strangers stood in the kitchen. Others were gathered around the dining table. No one recognized Ethan. No one even questioned why a military duffel bag was sitting near the entrance. Then he heard Melissa's voice. "My house has become the perfect place for hosting." Ethan froze. My house. He quietly walked farther inside. Melissa was standing in the center of the living room holding a glass and entertaining a group of guests. The furniture had been rearranged. Family photos had been removed. Decorations Ethan and I had chosen together were gone. It barely looked like our home. One guest asked Melissa, "How long have you lived here?" Melissa smiled confidently. "Long enough to make it my own." The room erupted with laughter. Ethan said that was the exact moment he understood something was very wrong. Before revealing himself, he continued observing. Several neighbors were talking about how Melissa managed the property. Others referred to her as the homeowner. The lies had spread much further than I realized. Finally, Ethan stepped forward. The moment Melissa saw him, the color drained from her face. Her smile vanished instantly. The room fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward the front door. Melissa stared at him as if she'd seen a ghost. "Ethan," my husband calmly set down his bag. Then he looked around the room, at the strangers, at the changes, at the woman standing in his living room pretending to own his house. His voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. "Can someone explain why my sister-in-law is introducing herself as the owner of my home?" No one said a word. And for the first time since Ethan left, Melissa looked genuinely afraid. The silence that followed Ethan's question was almost unbearable. No one in the room seemed to know what to say. Melissa stood frozen in the center of the living room, clutching her glass so tightly that her knuckles turned white. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Others quietly picked up their belongings and headed toward the door. Within minutes, the party was over. The house that had been filled with noise suddenly became silent. Ethan remained calm. That was what frightened Melissa the most. My husband wasn't yelling. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't making threats. He was simply observing. And Ethan had always been the kind of man who paid attention to details. When I finally arrived home, I found Melissa sitting nervously on the couch while Ethan reviewed security camera footage from our home system. The cameras had been installed before his deployment. Neither of us had paid much attention to them afterward. Now they became our greatest ally. Over the next 2 days, Ethan carefully reviewed months of recordings. What we discovered was worse than either of us expected. The footage showed Melissa hosting gatherings without permission, moving furniture, removing family photographs, allowing strangers into the house. There were even recordings of her telling visitors that she was basically the owner now. Ethan also collected screenshots from her social media accounts. Dozens of posts showed her presenting the house as her own. Every piece of evidence told the same story. Melissa hadn't simply overstayed her welcome. She had deliberately tried to replace us. Once Ethan finished gathering everything, he sent a group message to our parents, close relatives, and several family friends. He attached the evidence, videos, photos, screenshots, messages. Then he wrote a simple explanation of what had happened during his deployment. The reaction was immediate. Family members who had previously defended Melissa suddenly became very quiet. Several relatives called us to apologize. Others admitted they had believed Melissa's version of events. For months, she had convinced everyone that she was helping us. Now the truth was impossible to deny. My parents arrived the following afternoon expecting sympathy for Melissa. Instead, Ethan calmly showed them the evidence. The videos spoke for themselves. My mother watched in stunned silence. My father couldn't even look at the screen. For the first time, neither of them had an excuse. Neither of them could blame me for overreacting. The facts were right in front of them. Melissa tried to defend herself. It wasn't a big deal. But nobody believed her anymore. Not after seeing the proof. Not after hearing her own words on camera. That evening, Ethan handed Melissa a formal notice. She had 7 days to move out. No extensions, no negotiations, no second chances. The same family members who once pressured me to house her suddenly refused to take her side. One by one, the support she depended on disappeared. A week later, Melissa left. As the moving truck pulled away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For months, I had lived in fear of confrontation. For months, I had allowed others to convince me that my feelings didn't matter. Now, standing beside Ethan on our front porch, I finally felt free. The sweetest revenge wasn't humiliating Melissa. It wasn't exposing her lies. It wasn't watching her face consequences. The sweetest revenge was reclaiming my peace. It was learning to set boundaries. It was discovering that kindness doesn't require accepting disrespect. Most importantly, it was realizing that the people who truly loved me would never ask me to surrender my home, my dignity, or my voice. As Ethan wrapped his arm around my shoulders, we looked at the house that finally felt like ours again. The home we had built together, the home we had fought for, and this time no one would ever take it away from us.